It's KC101, time for another edition of Saturday with Seniors, brought to you by Eisenhower's Tioga County Harley-Davidson, South Mansfield. Looking for a bike? Come on in and check out the inventory there, both new and used bikes. Needing service work done? Get it done now so your bike is ready to ride when the riding season comes. And today, we've got Ivan Matheson joining us here. I'm at his home in Roseville, and hello, Ivan.
Hello.
Well, thank you for agreeing to do the show.
Well, I'm glad to do it.
I appreciate it. Dale McKay's here, too. He recommended that I bring you onto the show, so I'm interested to learn about your history. So how old are you, can I ask?
94.
So that means you were born in 1930?
29.
1929.
Yeah.
Wow. So when you were born, Prohibition was going on. It was World War II hadn't even started yet, right?
Oh.
Wow. So where were you born?
I was born up in the Adirondack section up in Herman, New York.
That's remote now. That was probably even more remote then.
Yeah. My dad was a pastor, and he pastored two churches, Herman and Russell. And he lived in one town in about 3 years, and then he moved to the other town, but he still pastored the two churches.
Wow. And your mom, where'd your mom come from?
Well, my mother was from Cooper's Plains, New York, up near Corning.
Was your dad in the military or anything?
No, he went to Practical Bible Training School in Johnson City, and he was a pastor, and his whole family have followed him. My sister, she married a pastor from Practical, and then I went to Practical and Bible Training School there in Johnson City, and my two brothers did, so we were all in the ministry.
Yeah, and you're still very active with your church, too.
Oh, yes. I don't remember missing a Sunday.
Yeah.
Even with my knee surgery, about the only Sundays I missed was when I was in the hospital.
Well, let's go back. So you were born up in the Adirondacks, and is that where you first went to school?
Yes, it was. And I started up there, and the first day of school, they had teeter-totters. I thought that was the greatest thing in the world. You know. Boy, the next morning, I couldn't hardly get up, and I teed, please don't make me go to school. I can't hardly walk.
The teeter-totters, or the seesaws, as they're sometimes called. So that was the best technology you had ever seen in your life at that point.
Yeah.
Obviously, there was no TV back then, no internet, no computers, no...
Only playing outdoors, playing ball, whatever.
Did you have electricity at that point in your house?
I don't remember.
Come on, it was only 90 years ago.
But, later on, I know we did. My wife's folks, they never had electricity until after we were married in 1950. The house was wired with gas, and then they had these, have a mantle on them in different places. You light the light in different rooms and have a gas light.
Something people know nothing about.
No.
I mean, out now. So how long did you live in the Adirondacks?
Well, I was just turned 7 when I moved from up there down to western Pennsylvania, out near Newcastle, Pennsylvania, because I remember very well that a young lady from the church there where Dad pastored took a liking to me, and she knew my birthday was coming up, and so she asked me what I wanted for a birthday, and I said a watch. Well, my dad had 2 pocket watches, and I thought that was the greatest thing, you know. I didn't even know anything about a wristwatch. And so she came Sunday and brought me this package, and I opened it, and it was a Mickey Mouse watch. And I looked at it and said, I wanted a man's watch. And I don't know whether she understood what I meant or not, but anyway, she talked to my dad about it, and he told her what I meant. And so she said, well, I'll get you a man's watch. So she got me a regular pocket watch, and I was tickled to death. I had that for over 3 years, and I was very careful with it. Eventually, it wasn't because I misused it or anything. It just simply finally quit. But
people were so much more careful with stuff in those days, is what I'm learning, that you had to make things last, that it wasn't a throwaway society.
Things, yeah.
When you were younger, do you remember like your shoes? Today, kids have 20 pairs of shoes. You would go to the cobbler and fix them, I would guess, when
Probably one pair.
Yeah.
One pair for best, maybe, and one for at the most.
You got a little rip in your pants, they weren't just thrown away. They were mended.
Mended, right.
So you moved to Western Pennsylvania when you were about 7, or your family came there. Was that to work in the church service? Is that what brought your family there?
Dad still pastored the church there, and then I don't remember when he gave it up, but it was when he got to not able to.
So you were in Western Pennsylvania, and were you there for several years?
Well, I was different places. I was in New York, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Kentucky. We went under a home missionary organization, And the first year they had me, I pastored a church. Then they transferred me to Kentucky, which was just right near there. And we taught Bible lessons in 10 country schools. They were wide open. And in fact, one school, the teacher demanded that every student learn their memory verse for that week.
Wow, that's interesting. So then when did you eventually end up coming to this area, to Tioga County?
Well, how come I got coming to this area? A fellow had asked me if I'd be interested to go to Chemung. And I said, no, I'm not ready to leave where I'm at now. And then later on, 3 or 4 years later, I decided, well, maybe it would be time for me to leave and look for another church. So I asked him, and I said, is Chemung still open? He says, no, it isn't. But he says, I know of a church that is, and it was up near Ithaca, New York. So I went up there and preached, and they had a business meeting that morning after church, and I didn't stay in the building. I went outside, but while they had the meeting, but they decided they wanted a younger pastor, which was fine with me. But the family that I had stayed with said her father's church was looking for a pastor, and she said, would it be all right if I give him your name? So she gave her father my name, and that's how I got here in Roseville. So he called me up, and I came and preached, and they voted on me and voted me in, and I was here over 11 years.
What year about?
I think that was about 88.
Wow, so you've been all over the place.
Yeah.
So your wife, Lois, I understand she passed away last year, but boy, I want to hear the story about how you met her, and because you had a really long relationship, incredible relationship is what I heard.
Bible training school, they had very strict social rules. Fellows and girls were not allowed to stand in the hallway and talk to each other. And I don't think that what happened was wrong, because we weren't standing talking to each other, just in passing. She made a statement to me, and I don't even hardly remember exactly what it was, but the fact that she spoke to me, something just hit me.
Yeah. Just felt it right from the start.
Yeah. At high school, I didn't take up with girls. There was a couple that were nice girls, and one of them I think really liked me, but I wasn't interested in her because I knew I was going to Bible school and would probably find somebody there, because I figured I probably would go into Christian work.
Yeah.
So anyway, nothing materialized till finally I asked her if she would go to the social room. You could get permission to go to a social room that was chaperoned, and you could sit next to them, but you couldn't hold hands or anything. But you could visit, and we did for quite a while. And then one day she told me, she said, oh, they had a post office on the grounds at Practical Bible Training School. It was just Bible School Park, New York. And at that time, a letter was 3 cents. Imagine that,
yeah.
3 cents for a letter. But if you mailed it within the post office, it was a penny. So fellows and girls would write penny letters. And so after we had gone a while to a social room, I got a penny letter that she didn't want to go with me anymore. I was heartbroken, but I thought, well, Lord, I guess that's what you want for me, so that's the way it is, and I just forgot about it, but I really thought she was a lovely girl. And one day, one of the fellows said to me, why don't you go with Bundy again? That was her last name, and they just called her Bundy. And I said, well, what do you say that for? She didn't want me. And I think this is the exact words that he said. She said she would go with you again.
How'd that feel?
When he said that, I mean, something inside, and I thought they would notice that I was excited, and I said, oh, she had her chance. But I knew she was getting another one. So I went home. I went home every week because I'd take a bus downtown, down to Binghamton at Hardware, and a fellow there lived right next to us. So he'd go home every weekend. My mother would wash my clothes and repack me clean clothes for the next week. Anyway, I wrote her a letter and asked her if that was true. I got to school and found out she was in the hospital. So I thought, I can't send that letter to her, and so I didn't. I went and made a card. Picture on the card, it was like one my sister had got. On the front of it was a roadway and like electric or telephone pole, and a big sign on it said wanted. And then on the inside of the card on the left side was a mirror. And it was like one my sister had got. But, of course, hers wasn't a real mirror. It was just a piece of metal. It was so shiny you could see yourself in it. I went downtown and bought a mirror and taped it on the inside there and said, this person wanted. And the next page inside, a picture of a bed with a big lump in it. And then I said, believed to be hiding in bed somewhere. Knew she was in the hospital. And then on the back, like a circle about the size of a quarter. And it said, around that, lettering made by Ivan Matheson, and sent it to her. And she still had that the day that she died. I know where it was at. I don't know where it's at now in the process of her death. It's got mislaid, but at that time she still had that. And that meant a lot to me to know that she cared enough about me to keep that.
Wow.
And we were married 72 years, and she was 93 or 4. I miss her terrible, but I know where she's at because she accepted Christ as her Savior, and I have, and so I'll see her again someday.
She's watching you right now with a big smile on her face. You know, can you imagine right now her listening to this?
I sit over and look at her picture, and I tell her every day, I love her. I'll see you someday.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh. 72 years married.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I don't know what to say. That's everybody wishes for that in their life. Boy, you've been all over with your life. Do you remember your first job? Did you get a paycheck, or was most of your stuff involved with the church? We'll go back in time.
From the church. I did a lot of just odd jobs. My dad had worked with a professional painter, and I had worked with him a good bit and learned a good bit about it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
The thing of it is, if you don't take a strip clear through and you stop, and then later on you come and you overlap it, as the paint wears off, it will show. And he taught me that when you start a strip through, you clear through. If you don't have time to do 5 or 6 layers, only do 1 and go clear through with it. So there's not that overlap because it won't show at first, but later on it will. So just odd jobs.
You remember how much you got paid for some of those jobs?
Not very much. Might have been $1 an hour.
Maybe, if that. That was pretty good.
Might have been that much.
Yeah. You're getting paid pretty well if it was $1 an hour back then.
Even through that, I had opportunity to do the Lord's work. One lady had built some cabinets for her. Another lady saw them, and she said, now we bought cabinets, but they're not installed. Would your pastor consider, since we don't go to his church, would he consider working for us? She said, I think he would. And so she told me, and I said, sure, I'll work for him. They don't have to come to my church for me to work for them. And so I worked for them, and they ended up all coming to my church and coming to know the Lord as their Savior. And so even through that type of work, so I just picked up odd jobs to meet my needs.
Yep. Lead by example is the most important.
Work steady, but just, maybe a job that would last a day, maybe it lasts a week or something like that. Or
Dale's telling me about a grandfather clock that you have in the corner that if you were listening 10 minutes ago, you heard chime on the show here in the background.
I cut the tree down that clock is made out of, and I sawed the lumber of it with a table saw.
By hand, with a table saw.
By hand, a table saw, and then put it up in the overhead garage where it was 110 degrees over the upstairs of a garage. It was just like kiln dried.
Hand sanded it and everything and all. That is a beautiful piece of work. I would have never guessed that. Wow, you did a great job. When you were a kid, what were some of the hobbies that you did? Now, today kids spend all their time looking at screens. It's a disaster in my opinion. But going back, what were some of the fun things do you remember doing when you were younger?
Well, when I was a kid, there was something about it. If there was a stream that had minnows in it, it attracted me. I remember one place they had a driveway, and it crossed a stream and just a wooden bridge. I'd lay there in that wooden bridge, and only about 4 foot down to the water. I'd lay there and watch those minnows, and if they'd get bigger enough to take a hook and bait, I would just drop it down right in front of them and catch these little chubs, and I'd even take them home and clean them, and then Mother would cook them for me.
Little sardines in size.
And I've been loving fishing ever since.
Still go fishing to this day?
I'm waiting for fishing weather to...
Yeah, not today, but...
Again, about 2 years ago, I got my 100th deer. And when I got that number 100, I said, that's it. I knew I had it down. It dropped when I shot, and I watched it. And then when I went to find it, I was stumbling all over the place. I was falling down, and I thought to myself, I'm no business here. This is my last one. Only problem was I got number 101 with the car.
Oh. Yeah, I've got number 1, 2, 3, and 4 with my car. I've never hunted.
Thing about it, he had 5 of them go down by his blind. They stopped and he couldn't see them, but he had a tag where he could shoot a buck or a doe. I was telling him for years to do that. He finally got it, and he seen this one, and all he could see was the body. Couldn't see the head, so he shot it, and it went down. And when he got there, it was a 10-point buck.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you got yourself a 10-point buck, and you didn't know what you were going to get. So 100 deer. I don't know how many other people in Tioga County can say they've harvested 100 deer in their life.
How could I keep track of it? When it got into teens, I thought to myself, I'll never be able to keep track if I don't write it down. So I would keep my old license from the year before along with my new license. And so when it was in the teens, I wrote down on that first license how many I'd got. And then the new license at the end of that year, I'd write on it and throw the old one away and keep that, the new old one.
Yeah.
Other than that, I would never have known, but I did that to keep track.
I love skiing, and I've been skiing for 46 years, and I've kept a log of everywhere I've gone since I started. And I'm so glad I did, because I'd never remember all the places I went after 46 years. But if you got a passion, it's fun to look back at what you did along the way. Do you remember TV for the first time, seeing the first television in your life? Or did it just kind of come into your life gently?
I can't remember when it was. I know we didn't have it. I think I heard about it and maybe knew of people that maybe had it, but we didn't have it for quite a while after that.
All right, I'm being told to ask you about a Reader's Digest story, Ivan.
About Reader's Digest, we had to have it in school, and they had special school editions that had an edition on the back of it for the school students. But if you got it at home, they would send the extra section for the number of the people that got it at home. And so rather than for my folks to send the money to get it at the school, I think it was $5 or something. I said, can I keep the $5 and put $20 with it and get a life subscription? At that time, they advertised life subscription for $25. So I sent and got that. And it wasn't too many years after that they canceled that out. So it's cost me somewhere around 25 cents a year.
Yeah, we need to divide it out. I guess, you were the one that would have changed. That's
my money's worth.
What a great story. Do you remember your first car?
Yes, my first car was a 32 Chevy. It was a lady had it, and she had a pair of chains for it, but I don't think they'd ever been on the car. She wouldn't drive it in the wintertime, and she was going to sell it, and I got that 32 Chevy. And went to Florida with it one time, and then another time, my wife, and she wasn't my wife at the time, but her and I and another girl had after Bible school training that summer. We went under a certain mission that could use just short-term, for vacation Bible school in different places. So we went down there, and they put her in different places and put me in several different places. And the one camp that she worked at, Bible camp for children, I stopped and got permission to talk to her for a half an hour. And I wanted to propose to her, but I waited till the very, very last thing. And I said to her, will you marry me? And I took her so by surprise, she says, I'll let you know. I had given her my address where I would be my next Bible camp for children. And so when I got there, I was a cabin counselor, stayed in a certain cabin with a number of other boys, and I had to watch over them, make sure they were in bed and everything a certain time at night. And so I offered to go out every day to get the mail for this mission camp. And this one day there was a letter from her, and I sat right down by the road and opened it and read it, and she said yes, she would marry me.
You found out by mail.
Yeah. So then we was married on her 21st birthday.
My mom got married on her 21st birthday. My dad proposed to her, and she said, I'm not getting married till I'm 21. Well, the first Saturday after she turned 21, they got married. So it sounds like that was a theme here, too.
Tell them about the snowstorm that day.
Just before that, on the way down, before we got married. There was this bad snowstorm, and I stopped to put chains on. And this car was coming up the hill, and he was just spinning, and as he was spinning, he was also coming sideways. And so I simply put my hand on the side of the fender and kind of pushed, and it was so slippery that just that slight push, the back end of the car went right out 2 or 3 foot. Of course, as they gradually went on, they, straightened up. But they went on by. Then I finally got my chains on and went down. And when I got down there, the road had been cleared. But I guess the family had spent pretty near a whole week just shoveling the roadway for several hundred yards to a certain place where they had plowed.
Wow. Times are different, huh?
All the time. Right.
You said her brothers and sisters shoveled her driveway out to meet you.
Yeah, they had the shovel. They had plowed, like I say, several hundred yards away.
This is on your wedding day?
No, it was the day I went to their place, but I went there several days before the wedding day.
It was on the arrival for the wedding there. Wow, quite a story. Anything else you'd like to share? Anything else I should ask you about? We've got a couple minutes left.
Well, we had 3 girls, and the third one, of course, then they didn't know whether it was boy or girl. They didn't have any way of knowing ahead of time. And she was in labor and in the hospital there in labor, and the doctor came out and he said, "I'm awful sorry, it's a girl." Oh, when he said it's awful sorry, I just knew something had happened, but when he said it's a girl, what a relief. He didn't realize that pause, in between.
Yeah.
But, I thought, thank you.
Yeah, complications with labor were more
and then,
common, unfortunately.
Then she had a tubal pregnancy and I almost lost her. She was so weak that she just laid there listless. They didn't know what the matter was. Finally, they found out it was a tubal pregnancy and she was losing blood. They had to give her at least, it was 4 or 5 pints of blood. And every pint, I could see a difference in her. I could see her beginning to respond. But if they hadn't found out what it was and started giving her blood, she'd have never made it through because she was just next to death right then. But there again, the Lord was good to us and spared her. And she asked the doctor, could this happen again? And he says it could, but not likely to. Well, probably half a year later, she said, I've got it again. She says the same symptoms. And of course, that time it was no problem because they operated right quick, but that meant no more children, of course, because she had 1 tubal pregnancy and then had it the second time, so that ended that. But we had the 3 girls, and we were satisfied. That's what the Lord wanted us to have.
You have grandkids and great-grandkids, too?
Yeah, and grandkids and great-grandkids, and my wife could have told you how many grandkids we had, or great-grandkids, but I can't tell you right offhand.
Quite a few, it sounds like.
Another thing I'd like to add, Ivan fishes, and he fishes and catches enough fish, fillets them out for the Bakerburg Church to have a fish fry once a year, and he feeds anywhere from 150 to 160 people.
Wow, I don't know if you could hear Dale off mic here, but in case you couldn't, Ivan, you fish a lot, and you've caught enough fish that you could take care of the fish fry.
Like I told you, when I was a kid, I just loved to fish, and I have ever since loved to fish. I started catching now the bluegills. Love to catch them too, and I clean them, but they're a little bit small for getting a fillet enough to feed a large group. But the crappies, that would be, most of them would be right around 10 inches, so you'd get at least a 6-inch fillet, and I filleted them enough for the church fish fry. And when I first asked the pastor the first time there, he said, yeah. I said, how many people? Oh, he said about 100. 100.
Here's your fishing pole and a can of worms.
Well, a church here in Roseville, I pastored, we'd had 25 at a fish fry, and it took 2 and part of another half gallons. So that meant a half a gallon will do 10 people. And of course, it's more than fish. I mean, people bring food to pass, but fish would be your main meat. And I'd have at least 10 half gallons.
Do you still do this now, or was this a one-time thing?
No, every year.
Every year.
So you still catch enough fish every year?
The only thing is, some year, now I freeze it in water, so that water covers it so that you can keep them over from one year to another. It doesn't freeze or burn. This year, I have nothing left over from last year. So between now and next September, I've got to catch enough fish for fish fry.
You probably got a really good secret fishing spot, but I don't think you want to share it on the radio if you're able to catch that many fish.
Yeah, I have several choice places. I have the last place I had permission. Started out when it was sold. I could fish it before, but when it was sold, I found out who owned it, and I went and talked to him about it. And at first he said catch and release only. And I told him that I just love to catch the panfish, for eating. Oh, he said if you want to catch the panfish and throw the bass back, well, he says you're welcome to fish. And so I've been fishing over there, and I'll not name it where it is because very few other people had permission to fish there. And I don't know about this year. I understood it's been sold again, so I'm going to have to recheck and find out who bought it and find out if I can still fish there. But it's a wonderful producer of crappies.
Yeah.
And I've caught some big bass and thrown back, too. But I look at it this way. A lot of people just fish for just the fun of catching them and throwing them back. So if I have to throw one back, well, I've had the fun of catching it anyway.
Sure. And knowing you're doing some good with it.
But another thing I've done, kids in town here, maybe they didn't have a dad, and he would stop and see them and take them fishing. To this day, I run into people that ask me, how's Ivan doing? I haven't seen him around. One guy told me, he said, he came to my trailer, lived in the trailer up there, and he asked me if I'd like to go fishing. And I said, well, I don't have a fishing pole. He said he was about 9 or 10 years old then. And Ivan said, well, I think I got an extra one. And he said, that old guy would stop, pick me up, take me fishing. And he said, and I learned to love it. And I taught my kids what Ivan taught me about fishing.
Wow, so you've taught a lot of our youth to fish.
I love to fish, and I love to even take children fishing. And I've taken a lot of different children fishing, and some of them have taken it up and really like it, and others perhaps not so much, but at least they enjoyed it at the time.
Sounds like you've done a lot of good in this world in your life. You've helped out a lot of people. You've brightened a lot of people's days.
That's the problem today. If kids had something to do, they wouldn't be getting into trouble so much. And so I figured, if they are out fishing, they're not getting into trouble.
That's 100% true. I agree. I mean, a lot of kids say, well, what am I supposed to do if I don't play on the computer or my video games? And I tell them go fishing or something. And they look at me like, huh? We survived without that stuff. So you want to give a mention to where you go to church and a little bit about your church before we wrap up? I know you're proud of what you do.
Well, right away, quick after they got a new pastor after I resigned, I would attend here. And finally, it just got to the place where this pastor was driving more people away than he was getting in. And it went from about 40 when I was pastored as the average to about 6 or 7. And so finally I just quit going there and went over to where a lot of other people from here had gone, over called Bakerburg. And I just love it over there. We've got a good congregation, a wonderful pastor, and he preaches the word like it's supposed to be. You can't go there without knowing the exact way of heaven. I was in a church one day. I'll not name the church, but it was having a clothing giveaway, and I needed another pair of pajamas, so I went and I did get a pair of pajamas, but just out of the blue I said to one of the fellows, what do you have to do to go to heaven? And he says, be good. Well, you wouldn't have anybody that attended our church very many times ever tell anybody that. And I said, no. I says, I don't think that's the way. That's not what the Bible says. Because the scripture says, for by grace are you saved through faith, not of yourself, lest any man should boast. So we don't get to heaven by being good. We get to heaven by trusting Christ as our Savior. And our pastor preaches that, and our people have been so wonderful. If you go in after a church, people are hugging each other and talking to each other and asking how each other is. And, they come to me and ask how I'm doing. And I try to be the same. And other people that have lost their mates, I've tried to, show the concern and care over them and ask them how they're doing, and they just keep trusting the Lord. It's all we can do.
So it sounds like something you look forward to each week. You feel good about going, and the social side of it is great, and it's good to look out for other people too. I think in this modern day world, we forget that every person out there has a whole life and emotions and feelings and challenges in life, and we just sometimes just walk right by them in this world.
Now, there's one thing about technology, this way of being able to stream a message over the radio. Is it good or bad? It can be both. It can be good if it's used in the right way by somebody that is not able to go to church. But if a person is able to go to church, they are first of all under God's command. God has commanded us. He says, "Forsake not the assembling of yourselves together, as the manner of some is." In other words, at that time when the scripture was written, there was people at the church that were forsaking their assembling together. God has given us a command, "Forsake not the assembling of yourselves together." And so his intention is fine if you are not able to go to church to hear it on your phone, but if you're able, God's command is don't forsake going to church. I myself feel that way. I would miss the fellowship of the people at church.
Absolutely. Well, Bakerburg Church is open, and I'm sure you'll be there to welcome anybody who shows up.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much for your time. This has been very fascinating.
Well, I certainly am welcome, and I just hope that this was kind of an encouragement to other people to realize how much we have today.
Yep, we have everything today that we had 100 years ago plus more, and we don't have to take the plus more if we don't want. We can just enjoy life as you enjoy it. Thank you so much. Ivan Matheson joining us here on Saturday with Seniors, brought to you by Eisenhower's